Vanakkam, this is Architect Vidya Lakshmi Rajashekar for Thali Talks. A very happy World Architecture Day. Thali tries to bring in an interview with the oldest firm that's in Chennai to trace the history of architectural practices in Chennai. We are here to interview one of the top 10 architects of India 2007 awardee and Padma Shri, CRN Raghavendran, CRN Architects. As an architecture student, we all know how much we are fascinated to have an internship or to work with CRN Architects. We had a very interesting session with Sir discussing about the origin of this office, his father CN Narayana Rao, how his father CN Narayana Rao started this office, though he was a civil engineer by profession, an architect by passion. Though he started his career as a PWD officer doing a lot of construction, he joined one of the oldest architectural offices of Chennai, and they cherished the architectural exposure and interest that Sir's father had, and they encouraged him to become an architect. So starting this firm in 1945, it's almost 75 plus years and doing a lot of different varieties of projects. This firm stands as an example or an exposure towards the architectural explorations of Tamil Nadu. Whatever demand was there in the Tamil Nadu region to construct a hospital or a sports facility or you call it an IT park, CRN Architects was the first one to give a try on it and do their best. We welcome you, sir, for this wonderful session of Thali Talks for the World Architecture Day celebration. Thali is very happy to have you here. Please watch this entire video where Sir has shared his father's experience and also his experience in the architectural fraternity. We are very happy to give these kinds of contents to architectural students and the architectural fraternity. Please do like, share and subscribe our videos and give us more support. Thank you.
I'm an architect. I passed out from IIT Kharagpur. I took a Bachelor's of Honours degree in Bachelor of Architecture degree in IIT Kharagpur. Then I took a Master's degree in the University of California at Berkeley. This all happened before 1970s. 67, 68 is what the period was. And after I passed out from University of California, Berkeley, I worked in Boston with a firm of architects, large firm of architects, and I had a good opportunity to handle a couple of projects with them. So I really knew what how they integrated technology and science into their design, and how they understand clients' requirements, how they gather information, how they do research, and all this was I understood. One thing that struck me was that they are very, very methodical in what they do, very systematic, so that they don't assume anything. They validate whatever they do. They validate first before they go to the next step, which I thought was a very good practice. And then afterwards I returned back to India and I joined the firm that my father had started, the architectural consultancy firm. He started this firm way back in 1945, that is more than 75 years ago. And then I joined him in about 1968 or so I joined, and since then I've been working as an architect, and I really enjoy being an architect and doing this work. And I'm right now 78, but I continue to work as vigorously as I was before, surely for the love of and the passion of doing buildings and doing projects and so on. The idea is that you have gained some experience and knowledge and so on, some skills, and when an opportunity presents itself, we should apply and do what best we can do, and in all cases do better than what you did last time. See, that kind of a drive was there, and invariably, even though we are very happy at the end of one project, but if you look back, you find that you could have done something else, or you could have done something else. So that kind of a thing makes you do better in the next project of a similar nature. So that is one of the interest that I had, and that continues to drive me to work on this almost on a continuous basis. So here I am. See, actually, it's frankly, it's reflective of the times that was going on there. That time, there was not much idea about architecture, about civil engineering, about other branches of engineering. In fact, if you see, there's very few architectural colleges. In fact, only 2 or 3. Maybe JJ College. Maybe there's one college in Delhi doing architecture, teaching architecture. That too was a diploma in Delhi. But most architects, if they want to be a regular architect, they had to take the RABA exam, that is Royal Institute of British Architects exam, that was held only in London or Colombo. You have to go to Colombo or London and write this exam. It's a very tough exam. And then you qualify as a member of the associate of the RABA, which is a very prestigious thing to have amongst architects. There were a handful of people in India. Perhaps in Mumbai area there were more people. In Chennai there were very few. And if you go deeper into the countryside, you will not find anybody. Now, who was doing the architectural work there? That was going on the basis of a traditional practice that was going on for centuries. That is, there are skilled masons who by sheer experience acquire more status and greater power to think through and so on, and they were masons. So these are the people who are actually offering building solutions to the society, whether it's a small house or it's a Kalada Mandapam or whether it's a public utility building. It was a mason who was doing this work. And what has he studied and what has he qualified? Practically nothing. But what is the strength? His strength is experience. His strength is skill that he has developed. And his strength is understanding the material that he is working with. He had a phenomenal understanding of what, he was a stone mason. He knew, by look of it, he knew what is a stone about, for what purpose and what location is ideally suited, and how the stone can be used in a efficient way. And economy was a driving factor those days, even today. So he also knew how to economize and optimize the construction techniques. So they were doing very traditionally, they were doing it, and the focus was not so much on planning. Planning was more or less fixed, rigid type of typologies were there, some 2 or 3 types. If you wanted a traditional row house, plenty of row houses were there. You had a row house, you had a mittam, you had rooms in the front, and you had a veranda, then you had this longish house, and it is a long tried system. In fact, it's a very well successful system that was evolved at that time. Those houses built maybe 100 years ago, 80 years ago are much more climatically better for the occupants than some of the buildings that we build today, irrespective of the orientation, irrespective of sun path movement. We just do things under the garb of creating something, but we miss out on fundamentals. So that way they did offer a lot of value to this. Now the transition of the British period, British came, occupied our, ruled our country, and then they went out after some time, they were forced to go out. So this firm started in the transition period. So there was a thing that, if somebody wanted to build something bigger than a house, he had nowhere to go. It is too much for the masonry to do. The material science was also changing. Masonry was not using traditional materials, it had to do with much more sophisticated things. Reinforced concrete was just coming in, and the masonries had not much idea about reinforced concrete, and so there was a real vacuum and there was a transition. So that is when the firm started, because my father qualified as a civil engineer from College of Engineering, Guindy. He passed out in 1935. Then after 1935 he worked with PWD and for a couple of years, and most of the works that PWD does those days were irrigation, roads, infrastructure, dams and this kind of thing, or some standard buildings like some collector office or something, which is a very standard thing that they used to do. They had a standard blueprint, and some British draftsman would have drawn it, and that's what they were building. That was the style of thing these days. But there is also a need to change. I mean, people were wanting to change, they wanted something different, they wanted something better, something they wanted to, relate to them. You don't relate to British design, but you relate to an Indian design. So that kind of thing was there as an undercurrent. That's the period when my father felt that, and he has worked and with another British architect those days, which is a very formative period in his career. It is a firm called Jackson and Barker. Jackson and Barker is a very well-known, reputed British architects in India for a long time. There are a lot of successful buildings done in this period in this area. My father joined the firm after his stint at PWD and Port Trust and so on. Then he was very sensitive to what architects do and what is the relation between architecture and civil engineering, and you had to widen your base, and when you build something the way architect wants, you must first of all know why he wants it like that. So that keenness to learn was there. So that way he learnt a lot about why architects do something and what they like, what they don't like, what is considered good, what is considered not good in that limited period of time. And the firm also recognized his capacity as being slightly more than a normal civil engineer. I mean, civil engineer with a flair for architecture, they realized it. Therefore, they gave him opportunity to grow also. That was a big break that he had. And in fact, he was in charge of the supervising the construction and as a site manager, site coordinator, whatever you call it these days, for two important buildings in Chennai. One is the Hindu office in Mount Road, and the other was the Kanivara Hotel. Now, those days, these are big projects. I mean, it's not like today, nobody will care for, you don't even know where Kanivara Hotel is, most people, unless you have a sense of history. It's not one of those flashy hotels, and the Hindu office is somewhat tucked away, and you know it as a good heritage building, but you don't know much more about it. I don't think many students of architecture today will look at these buildings twice. Okay, so that is it. But those buildings did have a sense of engineering going into it. It had a sense of aesthetics going into it. It reflected an era. The Art Deco style was running running through as an important consideration. So the everything related to the jolly design, the grill design, the balustrades, the molds, friezes, and doors, everything was somewhat related to this kind of movement, and therefore it was a period in which a lot of these transitions were taking place. So he started his practice after his stint at Jackson and Barker, because he felt that was the time when 1945 he started, 1947 we got independence. So the opportunities were there, challenges were also there. So he took the plunge and then he became an architect, and even though he was a civil engineer, there was a thin barrier between architects and civil engineers those days, and therefore he successfully sort of transitioned himself, and he had a lot of projects to do. Usually people start with some simple houses and so on, and then he moved on to, he had opportunity to work on some large projects which are coming in those days. Because his work in Hindu and the Kanivara gave him some impetus to work on larger projects. So he had big opportunity to work with large industrial establishments that are coming up those days, thanks to the Tamil Nadu government's progressive views on industrialization those days. In fact, one of the very few states which felt that industrialization was the future. Therefore, Tamil Nadu government at the time, R. Venkataraman and C. Subramaniam were all there at the helm. They had a good promotional thing. They brought a lot of industry investment into this. So some of the major works that we did in this period, my father did, was the TI cycles, the new factory in Ambattur. At that time, it was one of the largest cycle factories in the world, in Asia. And then he worked with Simpson group of companies. He worked for them for several buildings in their estate. For several areas like tractors were coming. The tractor factory was designed by him. The tractor was just getting into the Indian agriculture thing when India was so poorly placed as far as food is concerned. We had to depend on aid from other countries to even sustain. So that is when this movement of agriculture, the growth started, tractors started. And then Ashok Leyland was his startup, his job at that time. Again, transportation was taking over as important thing. People, mobility became important. So buses and trucks and all that were very important. A lot of commercial movement. So these are all the trajectory of how the growth of economy and society moves. So that's the growth. We found in later hindsight, when we look back today, we found that our trajectory, the growth of CRN trajectory, the growth of the state's trajectory in terms of whatever you do, it could be industrialization, it could be health infrastructure, it could be education infrastructure, it could be sports infrastructure, it could be IT infrastructure, it could be biotechnology, whatever is happening, our trajectory was very closely matching that. In hindsight, we realized that we were so closely linked. This gave us a lot of insight in the sense that you have to relate to others to work successfully as an architect. We don't exist in isolation, and we had to relate to others, and we had to work as a team. We had to be sensitive to others' requirements and what they expect, what the trend will be, and what the future is, and we had to be constantly upgrading ourselves to handle new challenges, new things. But it's so many buildings that we've done in the last. I've been here from '68 onwards. There are so many buildings I have done in which there was no precedence before. I have not done that kind of building before. First time you are thrown in to do that building. Now, how do you do that? So, you have to have a basic skill to start from the scratch, and then strengthen your approach so that you are on sound track, and then that leads you on that. So these are all hard lessons that you get. Of course, you make mistakes. Therefore, a constant review of your own work is very important for an architect. We can glibly say that I have done a great job and all that, but honestly, your great job that you think is a great job could be not so great also. You should be humble enough to review it. You should be humble enough to learn lesson from whatever it is there. Could you have done better is one question that you must be able to understand and answer. Could you have done better? So that these are all qualities that come the hard way, because he struggled, and because in early periods we had to struggle with work. We had to be aware of all this, and we had to be sensitive to this. So this is where how we grew, and today, as I told you, we have done a spectrum of projects, which is as primitive as some very simple shed or something, or a simple building, to very complex hospitals, to very complex IT parks, to a very complex sports stadia, which is international standard, and complex data centers, and complex R&D labs. For instance, the GE is one of the world's leading research establishments. They had a big establishment in Bangalore, carrying out a lot of research. Like that, lot of research is happening here in India on behalf of the foreign countries. They find it cheaper, they find good manpower and so on. So, we moved into service that caliber of people also. So, this transition has been remarkable, and it's constantly a lesson to learn. It's constantly a lesson to learn from scratch. You know nothing about a new project that comes, but you have to learn, and you have to learn how to do it. What are the intricacies? What tips the balance? What is crucial? And this helps. This comes out of one good thing is you must be lucky to get a client who can talk to you. If you talk to the client, that's a good first step, because otherwise you don't know him. He doesn't know what you do. When you ask a question, he doesn't know why you are asking that question. But you are asking a question because you want to know more about him, his project, or our project, or whatever you want to learn. So the dialogue forms a very critical first step. Of course, the site analysis, all that comes later. But if you don't know what you are building, to whom you are building, and what expectations you have to meet, what do you do? See, my simplest answer to the house design is what do people expect in a house? In the beginning, it is a joint family, the group housing, and then the joint family is disintegrated, is gone and forever. And there are individual families. There are also families which are today very different in terms of age and in terms of affordability. For instance, people will build a house at the end of the career. Today people are wanting to buy a flat or build a house much earlier in their career. So they are much younger set of clients, and they are full of ideas and full of energy and vigor. So the makeup changes in terms of whom you build design for. So there's a transition there. So naturally the house design also undergoes a change. This is one change that we see. Today people expect a living space. In those days you expect a dining room. Today they want a living space. It's a livability concept. And those days it was just you and your family. But today you and your friends. That's the concept. And not only you and your friends, but your children and your children's friends. See, these are all changes that were never thought of earlier. In those days, young days, if you had a friend, if you had a group of friends, the parents will say, "Velila poi vilayadu." So you go and play outside. There are plenty of open spaces to read, shady places, good places, safe places, no traffic. So you had places, no digging up. But today you can't do that. So you have to play indoors. Or where you have some garden also, it's so manicured that the gardener will come and say, "Oh, don't step on the lawn." So there are a lot of restrictions. So one is change of people that you do. The second is change in ideas of comfort. The change in ideas of comfort have changed. In fact, I have one criticism for Vastu. When I started designing houses way back in 70s and so on, the Vastu was not in the present form at all. They had a Manedi Shastram and they had a Vastu. Vastu in the sense they had a Vastu which is based on climate. So automatically you don't put bedrooms or living rooms on the western face because it absorbs a lot of heat, and the breeze in Chennai, for instance, came from south and east. So south and east are very good directions to put all your living areas and bedroom areas. And a kitchen, you needed a lot of light, so put it on the northeast corner so you get a lot of light to the kitchen. And that's how it started. All your bathrooms and nothing will be on the west, and other services will be in the west. And ideally, if you can afford, you have a courtyard inside. If you can afford, the plot should be big and money should be there. So this is the concept that was there for quite a number of years. Till even 80s, 90s, it was there. Therefore, if I tell a client, he comes to me and I tell him, "Oh my, great, you got a south-facing plot. Excellent, we will do a south-facing building so that you can put all your living areas on the south." That was welcome those days. But today you go and tell a client that I will give you a south-facing building on a south-facing plot, say, "No sir, my Vastu fellow doesn't object, doesn't approve." So see, the Vastu is changed life. But I think fundamentally the old Vastu I believe in, not this new Vastu. I have not much respect for it. Of course, people want to, so sometimes we do it, but really they were worried about cross ventilation, they were worried about heat, they were worried about lighting. See, that's a fundamental. Even today, all this green building and all that, they talk about the same thing. But that was being practiced in a very simple way. And courtyard was such a wonderful concept. Today, when you do, except you do some large group housing, the concept of courtyard doesn't come into the ordinary buildings. Because land space is more, you don't have land is expensive, so you don't do it. That's the second thing. Third, of course, is materiality. Today you have all kinds of materials, and you had flooring tiles, for instance. In the old days, I remember some of the houses, they used to buy the clay tiles, beautiful clay tiles from that, some handmade clay tiles, beautiful clay tiles. Then mosaic came. And mosaic was a fad for almost 3-4 decades. Mosaic tile where they lay it and polish it and all that, it became a fad. The original tile, which was good to look at, pleasing to the eye, colors, earthy colors, good patterns and so on, was gone. And this flat mosaic tile came and sat and occupied it, grey in color usually, and such a dull, boring thing it was there. And that's gone. Now you have all these ceramic tiles, and you have some wooden tiles, you have all these things have come in today. So there's huge transition in what you do. But there are still people who don't want to go back to that old tile and revive it so that you get a thing. So material influences on buildings are very high. They have been extremely high. You also in terms of managing the challenges is much. We have more capability today. In fact, if you see some of the old colonial buildings, they had a deep veranda in the front, all around the house, some 10 feet or 12 feet, just veranda kind of thing. And you had rooms inside, and rooms had tall windows almost reaching to your floor, and the windows had not glass, but it had wooden louvers. You can keep the louvre up and get vent. And those houses had high roof, and so inside the house, some of the railway houses, if you go and see those days, it's so cool. And today we have all this 3 meter high ceiling. You're cramped, your idea of space is gone, you are not comfortable, and of course air conditioning has become a necessity today. So people live on air conditioning. So air conditioning is brought in a new grammar altogether in this whole housing pattern. So the requirements remaining more or less the same, but the grammar and outlook has changed a lot in this housing type.